Arab foreign ministers and the PLO Secretary General meet with the US Middle East envoy to discuss the Gaza reconstruction plan. Syria forms a National Security Council led by President al-Ashara to oversee security and political strategies. The European Commission announces the EU will impose counter-tariffs of $28 billion on US goods starting next month. Hello there, good morning. It's 10 o'clock Cairo local time. You're watching Q News. Thanks for being there with us. We begin today's bulletin with the latest on Gaza. The foreign ministers of Egypt, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, the UAE, and the Secretary General of the Executive Committee of the Palestine Liberation Organization held a meeting with the envoy for the Middle East to discuss the Gaza reconstruction plan, which was approved at the Arab Summit held in Cairo on March 4th. The Arab ministers emphasized the importance of securing a ceasefire in Gaza and the occupied Palestinian territories. They stressed the need to initiate a genuine effort to achieve a just and comprehensive peace based on the two-state solution, ensuring the fulfillment of the Palestinian people's aspirations for freedom and independence. US President Donald Trump has said that nobody is expelling any Palestinians from Gaza. Trump has resumed his close alliance with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu since taking office in January. He has previously said that all Palestinians should be removed from Gaza, at least temporarily, following a peace deal. But speaking alongside Trump, Irish Prime Minister Michael Martin said aid needed to be surged into Gaza, while also calling for a ceasefire and the release of all remaining detainees.
I've never seen anything like it. Those are other clips I get to see. You know, as president, you get to see clips that you'd rather not see, but I see clips, and that was a terrible day.
Israeli occupation forces have launched an attack on El Shujaya neighborhood in the eastern Gaza, causing casualties. The occupation also fired shots east of El Farahin in Qnews. Meanwhile, Hamas and Israel resumed ceasefire negotiations in Doha, aiming to advance the second phase of the agreement that began on January 19th and ended its first phase on March 1st. Hamas stated it is engaging in the talks with positivity and responsibility. Israeli occupation forces have launched multiple raids across the West Bank, targeting various areas. Israeli troops stormed Aqabat Jebah and Ain Sultan refugee camps in Jericho, as well as the cities of Qalqilia and Al Khalil. In central West Bank, occupation forces also raided several towns in Ramallah, with no reported injuries or arrests. Palestinian sources reported that on Wednesday, Israeli forces demolished a home in Qalqilia and arrested 30 Palestinians in raids across different West Bank areas. Hamas has announced that the continued power cuts in Gaza for over 16 months, followed by the recent disconnection of the electricity line supplying the Deir al-Balah water desalination plant, constitute a war crime, threatening a potential water crisis. Hamas condemned the use of water and food as weapons against civilians, accusing Netanyahu's government of committing collective punishment. They called for immediate international action to stop these violations and hold Israeli leaders accountable.
Assalamu alaikum.
Germany Foreign Minister, a spokesperson, Catherine de Schauer, has urged Israel to comply with its obligations under international law regarding the suspension of humanitarian aid to Gaza. In a press statement, de Schauer expressed concern over the recent suspension of humanitarian aid and electricity and water supplies to Gaza. She called on the Israeli government to restore the entry of humanitarian aid and supply of the electricity to the Strip, noting that it was a matter of providing vital supplies for a large number of people. Doctors Without Borders has called on the Israeli occupation authorities to stop using humanitarian aid as a tool of war. In a statement, the international organization condemned the occupation's blockade, which deprives Gazans of basic supplies and vital services. The organization stated that Israel should never use humanitarian aid as a bargaining chip. The organization added it is trying to increase its activities, especially in northern Gaza. After the ceasefire that paused the war in January, Palestinian authorities have managed to rehabilitate dozens of schools across Gaza. For 15 months, Gaza's children were out of school as buildings were either destroyed or used as shelters. Hundreds of thousands lost a year of education. At least 39,000 missed final exams. UNICEF reports that over 95% of Gaza's schools are damaged, affecting 785,000 students. Now from Gaza to the latest developments in Syria. The Syrian presidency has announced the formation of a National Security Council chaired by interim President Ahmed al-Shara to coordinate the country's security and political strategies. According to a presidential statement, the council will include the Ministers of Foreign Affairs, Defense and Interior, along with Director of General Intelligence, two advisory members appointed based on expertise and a specialized technical seat. Meetings will be held regularly at the President's request, with decisions made in consultation among members. The Council structure and operations will align with national interests and directives from the Presidency. The decision is effective immediately and has been communicated to relevant authorities for implementation. Syrian interim President Ahmed al-Shara is expected to attend the International Donors Summit in Brussels on March 17th. This will be his first visit to Europe since assuming temporary leadership after the fall of Bashar al-Assad in December last year. The conference, hosted by the European Union, aims to mobilize international support for a peaceful and inclusive transition in Syria. Syrian state media has reported that a group attempted to attack a military barracks in Latakia's countryside, but was repelled by security forces who captured 4 assailants. Syrian President Ahmed al-Shara condemned mass killings targeting the Alawite community, warning they threaten national unity and vowing to hold all perpetrators accountable, including allies if necessary. Recent clashes in Syria's coastal towns have resulted in hundreds of deaths. In response, the presidency announced the formation of a high committee to maintain civil peace and engage with communities in western Syria. Canada has announced new measures to support Syria with humanitarian aid and promote a peaceful, inclusive future. Canadian ministers Melanie Joly and Ahmed Hussein condemned the recent violence in Tartus, Latakia and Homs, urging civilian protection. Hussein announced $84 million in aid, bringing Canada's 2024 support for Syria to over $100 million. Israeli troops have been seen along the border with Lebanon a day after Israel said it had agreed to hold talks to demarcate the border. A statement by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office said Israel had agreed with Lebanon, the US and France to establish working groups to discuss the demarcation line between the two countries. Israel also said it would release 5 Lebanese held by the Israeli occupation military in what it called a gesture to the Lebanese president. And now we're going to get the latest developments on the Russia-Ukraine conflict. The Russian President Vladimir Putin has visited the western Russian region of Kursk for the first time since Ukrainian forces seized some territory in the region. Putin heard a report from Valery Gerasimov, who is the head of the Russian General Staff, who told him that Ukrainian troops in the Kursk region were now surrounded. Putin also said that forces should completely liberate the region from the Ukrainian troops as soon as possible.
Сумской области Украины в феврале текущего года позволили украинские военнослужащие в виде
The Kremlin has stated that Russian troops are successfully advancing in Russia's western Kursk region and recapturing villages from Ukrainian forces there. The Russian Defense Ministry said that its troops had retaken 5 settlements in Kursk near the Ukrainian border, as Moscow pushes to eject Kyiv's forces, who seized a slice of the region in a cross-border incursion last August. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has hailed a meeting between the US and Ukraine this week aimed at ending the conflict and said a proposed ceasefire could be used to draft a broader peace deal. Zelensky added that the Jeddah meeting had helped de-escalate tensions between the US and Ukraine after the White House clash between him and President Donald Trump last month. The United States said it was resuming military aid and intelligence sharing with Ukraine after US and Ukrainian officials agreed in Saudi Arabia on a 30-day ceasefire with Russia.
Especially when we speak about the occupied territory.
US President Donald Trump has said that US officials were heading to Russia to discuss a US-Ukraine agreement on a proposed 30-day pause in fighting and a pathway to peace talks. Trump said it was now up to Russia after Ukraine agreed to a ceasefire following more than 8 hours of talks with US officials in Saudi Arabia. When asked if he would take any action to pressure Russia, Trump said he could impose financial measures, which would be very bad for Russia. However, he added that he doesn't want to do that because he wants peace.
People are going to Russia right now as we speak, and hopefully we can get a ceasefire from Russia. And if we do, I think
U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has announced the U.S. would engage with Russia about the 30-day ceasefire agreement reached with Ukraine. Rubio urged Russia to seriously consider ending hostilities, warning that a negative response would force the U.S. to reassess its stance. He emphasized that Russia's response would reveal its true intentions. Rubio also stressed that there is no military solution and Ukraine needs. He confirmed Washington's ongoing engagement with a proposal highlighted Ukraine's demand for security guarantees and and the return of detained children.
And there's a real chance of peace. If their response is no, it would be highly unfortunate, and it would make
The Kremlin has said that it needs to be briefed by the US on the results of the US-Ukraine talks in Saudi Arabia before commenting on the proposed ceasefire in Ukraine. Earlier, Ukraine announced its readiness to support a 30-day ceasefire from the United States. US officials Marco Rubio and Mike Waltz will inform Russia of the discussions. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov mentioned the possibility of a quick phone call between Presidents Putin and Trump if necessary. Now let's go across to Mona Masahi in our newsroom. Mona.
Thank you so much, Mark. And now we move to the economic segment. The European Commission has announced the European Union will impose counter tariffs on $28 billion worth of US goods from next month. European Commission Chief Ursula von der Leyen said countermeasures they take are strong but proportionate. She added, as the United States are applying tariffs worth $28 billion, the European Union is responding with countermeasures worth €26 billion. The European Commission said it will end its current suspension of tariffs on US products on April 1st and that its tariff will be fully in place by April 13th.
The European Union must act to protect.
US President Donald Trump has vowed to respond to the European Union's threat to impose counter tariffs on $28 billion worth of US goods from next month after Trump implemented blanket tariff on steel and aluminium imports. At an Oval Office meeting with Irish Prime Minister Michael Martin, Trump said Ireland's a member of the European Union was among countries taking advantage of the United States. He said reciprocal tariffs would help rebuild US manufacturing. His increased tariffs on steel and aluminium imports took effect Wednesday, escalating a global trade war.
I love it. It does great. But I'd like to see the United States not have been so.
Canada has announced it will impose $29.8 billion Canadian dollars in retaliatory tariffs on the United States, effectively today, March 13, in response to US President Donald Trump's steel and aluminium tariffs. Canada is the biggest foreign supplier of steel and aluminium to the United States. Canada's retaliation targets steel products worth $12.6 billion Canadian dollars, aluminium products worth $3 billion Canadian dollars, as well as additional imported US goods worth $14.2 billion Canadian dollars, for a total of $29.8 billion US dollars.
Products worth $3 billion, as well as additional imported US goods worth $14.2 billion.
Mexico's President Claudia Sheinbaum has stated that her government will not immediately retaliate to new 25% tariffs imposed by the US on all steel and aluminium imports, and instead will wait for a possible resolution in the coming weeks. US President Donald Trump's increased tariffs on all steel and aluminium imports took effect with no expectations of exemptions, escalating the global trade war. The tariffs threaten an already tragic Mexican economy that is teetering towards a technical recession and faces the highest budget deficit since 1980s. Germany's outgoing Chancellor Olaf Scholz has criticized the trade policy of the United States and said that the European Union would respond swiftly to tariffs imposed under President Donald Trump. Scholz said at a press conference in Berlin alongside European Council President Antonio Costa. Germany needs fewer trade barriers, not more, which is why he thinks the US customs regulations are wrong. Meanwhile, Costa said the European Union was open to talking with the United States about any trade imbalances and stressed the importance of de-escalation. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer has said that while he was disappointed that the UK steel and aluminium exports to the US were now subjected to tariff, London was negotiating a trade deal with all options on the table. Speaking at the weekly Prime Minister's session in Parliament, Starmer told lawmakers he should take a pragmatic approach to the tariffs. Starmer also said his government has used hard work, discussions and diplomacy to push for the restoration of US military aid to Ukraine.
Like everybody else, I'm disappointed to see global tariffs in relation to steel and aluminium. We will take people.
And now we go back to you, Mark, in our studio.
Thank you very much, Mona. Mona Masari there doing our latest economic news. And let's recap the main news headlines this morning. Arab foreign ministers and the PLO Secretary General meet with the US Middle East envoy to discuss the Gaza reconstruction plan. Syria forms National Security Council led by President al-Shara to oversee security and political strategies. The European Commission announces the EU will impose counter tariffs of $28 billion on US goods starting next month. And that's it for our news bulletin for this hour. Don't forget you can follow us on your social media platforms at Qnews EGY. Thank you for watching and stay tuned for more updates here on Qnews. Good morning.